Welcome to the September 2016 episode of the Mozilla Curriculum Workshop. I'm Chad Sansing, a curriculum designer at the Mozilla Foundation and co-host of the show. Today we're going to be talking about Maker Party and copyright with our guests and audience members. So thank you all very much for joining us. Well, this year's Maker Party focuses on crucial copyright reform issues facing the European Union. Copyright is really important to us all. Learning more about how copyright, open licensing, things like public domain or the commons, learning about these things helps us better understand what's at stake online when we want to work open or when we confront censorship, overreach, or the misuse of work that we and others create. So to keep the web open and accessible for all, and to keep making it possible to share work openly there, we all need to understand the challenges posed by outdated copyright laws and the opportunities we have to either change those laws or share our work within them. I will say though, however, this webcast is not going to offer legal advice. So today we're going to try to help people find ways to teach and learn about copyright and related issues where they live, rather than prescribe this or that. Copyright changes an awful lot from place to place. So discovering and creating resources that help us locally is going to be more helpful in the long run than trying to define a universally applicable copyright rule. Those kinds of rules really don't exist when it comes to copyright. We're going to cover just a few logistical details now before we begin to make sure we can all start off together. So due to changes in YouTube policy, we're going to be streaming from our YouTube channel today rather than from the workshop landing page. If you see people on social media or in our Etherpad asking about the stream, please share the link you have and send them here. You can still find that Etherpad on our landing page though at learning.mozilla.org/community/curriculum-workshop. It's great to be back with you all after a short break in programming in August. Please remember this is a participatory webcast, so our audience members are crucial to its success. At any point today, please share your questions, suggestions, thoughts on the Etherpad. We love engaging with you there and bringing your questions to our guests. As usual, about halfway through the show, we'll shift from discussion to prototyping and working on some teaching and learning materials about copyright, especially on the web. Today, we're going to try to puzzle out great ways to engage youth and colleagues and the general public with learning more about copyright where they are. If you're curious to learn more about the Maker Party campaign or the issues at play right now in the European Union, please check out the Etherpad around line, it looks like 36 right now, for more links. With that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Amira for introductions.
Thank you, Chad. I am so excited to be back with our regular scheduled programming call. I'm Amira, and I also work at Mozilla, and I lead our programs related to women in web literacy. And I'm really excited to not only celebrate my favorite party of the year, which is known as Maker Party, but also very focus in on this key important issue of copyright, and talk about it with individuals who know copyright, are dealing with copyright in their country, or are just learning and understanding the cusp of what is copyright and how to integrate it into their regular programs or learnings or teachings themselves. So I'm really excited to jump on in. As Chad said, we want you to jump on in as well. So please do chat with us. We're in the Etherpad. This is a shout out to our speakers as well. Do jump into the Etherpad to share links. There's lots of comments and questions that often happen, and we're really excited to engage with all of you and all of the rest of you in the Ether world. So without any further ado, I'm going to start off with some introductions of who we have here with us, and I'm going to go in order of the Etherpad. So Christy, who also happens to be first on my screen, which is perfect, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are in the world, and what you do?
Okay. Oh, have I unmuted? Okay, good. there. So hi, I'm Christy. I am a research associate at Michigan State University. So that's in East Lansing, Michigan, but I'm come via Canada, so I'm a Canadian living in the US. I am a quantitative population community ecologist. I mostly focus on insects in managed ecosystems, so looking at how we deal with insects in the world around us, and how they benefit us and how they can be detrimental to us. But I became really interested in the open science movement a couple years back when I started trying to answer some bigger questions. And so I got involved with the Mozilla Science Lab, and was one of the fellows during the first year of the fellowship program. And so I'm really excited to chat with you guys today. I should probably mention, I also developed a course. I developed a course for senior undergraduates and graduate students to bring them into the open science world through reproducible research skills. And so I can drop some links into that if people are interested in going to visit that, because I'd love to see it taught around the world.
Wonderful. Please do drop that in the Etherpad. Thank you, Christy. I'm going to move on to Philip. Philip, tell us about yourself, where you are, and what do you do?
Hi, my name's Philip. I'm the content lead for the Coder Dojo Foundation. We are the charity that supports coding clubs in 66 countries, I want to say, around the world. What I do is I create content that the foundation releases under Creative Commons license to all of our members to use to help them run their dojos. I also help community mentors or even occasionally some of the kids learn to produce resources that they share on our website for the community, again, to use and share. I have, given that we release everything under Creative Commons, not a huge amount of background with copyright law, so I'm hoping to learn some interesting stuff in that regard. I'm in Dublin, in Ireland, and despite the fact that this looks like a dungeon, I swear it's an office.
Nice. I will vouch for the fact that that is an office. And also will say that you might know more copyright than you think, Philip. Wonderful, thank you and welcome. Moving on to our last speaker, Mark. Welcome. Introduce yourself, where you're from, and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm a Yorkshireman from the UK, based in Switzerland, just on the shores of Lake Geneva. I'm a digital learning lead, technology integration lead in school. I'm working from K all the way up through to 12. I founded the Mozilla Club Switzerland, the first in Switzerland, last year, which grew into something called the Makers Jam. I had the idea of musicians jamming together and making something different, and the kids had the idea of getting lots of different fruits together and heating them up and making jam, which is a similar thing, I suppose. So combining ideas and making something new. So that's where the club's gone. The club's evolved into an art and code club, so looking at learning to program through artwork and creating artwork. So pretty interesting how we might copyright our artworks using various things such as processing or Scratch and those platforms, but looking at it from an artist's perspective. That's me. We have various programs going on in school. I'm looking forward to MozFest as always, and I wish school could be like MozFest. That's my dream.
That is the dream, good sir. The dream. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us all today. I'm gonna pass to Chad so he can kick us off with the first question.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll second what Mark said. I think going to MozFest definitely changed the way that I taught in the classroom. So you can check it out, please do. On to the questions, here we go. So I'm gonna pose this first question a couple of different ways, and you can engage with it any way you'd like. And it's about just kind of copyright itself and how it shows up where you are. So where you live and work, what is copyright like? What are the rules that are kind of most obvious or that you have to follow most often or have to teach and learn about most often? We could also talk about this as how does working open or using open licenses in addition to copyright look where you are? How does that show up in your work? You could also pose some questions about it. So when you think about copyright, what questions do you have? I think any of those things, any of those places are a good place to start. So how does copyright show up in your work where you live? Or how does open licensing show up the same way? Or when you think about copyright, when you think about open licensing, what are the questions you grapple with in your work? And anyone can take it away.
I guess I'll start.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone in Western academia. So I work at a university, and my primary research product, the thing that my goal to produce is research papers, and they're published in scientific journals. And so that's an intellectual piece of property that I produce in my work and my colleagues all produce. But the way that the regulations are around it, we essentially sign away copyright when we go to publish it. And then the copyright is held by whatever journal holds it. Of course, that also depends on things like the funding situation, where we got our funds from. So certain grants can place stipulations that no, they retain the copyright for the work produced. But it's actually fairly rare that a scientist maintains the copyright of their own work. So that's one of the things that we have to explore a lot in academia. It's been a very recent innovation that scientists, well, a recent innovation in my field. It's been going back quite some time in physics, but in biology, we hadn't even considered really putting up preprints of our work before the publishers got it. And so we would retain copyright and power over that piece of information. But so those are pieces of our work that haven't been through the publisher's editorial process that we put up and can give public access to. So that's where I'm at with copyright.
Shall I step in? Lots of different perspectives to think about. For me, we're in Switzerland, where it is legal to stream illegal stuff. It will be in any other country. So use of something like, for example, popcorn time. It's the default for all our students. They're talking about what they've streamed, and it's not an issue. So that's one thing, Switzerland, that's different to the rest of the EU. I was in Germany before, and it was actually really challenging to just stream something like BBC iPlayer, as it was geo-blocked. The geo-blocking of things was very strong in Germany, and that's a challenge I've found. And I think, we have a one-to-one bring your own device program in school, so the students are creating an awful lot of content, movie content, animation content, sound, music production, art, as I was talking about. And I think my question is how do you maintain ownership of that content? I think the organization that runs our school has the right to say that they own everything that's produced within the school. But I think as a young creator, that's quite a challenge, that they can't actually take with them their portfolio for their job, their whatever they're going to be doing in the future. And we've asked a lot of questions about this, and I don't really know where we stand with it. Because if it was me as a young student and I've got this amazing digital and paper portfolio, I'd actually want to take that with me, and who knows, that could get me the job that I've always dreamt of in the future. It might not be the traditional CV and things like that. So that's sort of my question as to how we can go about getting ownership of the things we're producing. But both as teachers as well, we have that same issue, that things that we create content-wise in school is not owned by us. And how can we take that with us? Because we're in a world where we'll have multiple jobs, and how can we maintain ownership over that? So that's sort of what would be great to talk a little bit further about. Thanks.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm quite fortunate in this regard. I mean, yeah, I live in a country in the EU, so copyright law is fairly similar to the US, I think, in a lot of ways, in that we inherit most of our body of copyright law from Brussels. But my work, at least, Coder Dojo is deeply rooted in open source and open development, and our software is all up on GitHub, and I generally only have to worry about copyright where I find a great piece of community content and I need to go talk to the community member who created it and get their permission to share it. That's the only place where I think copyright really comes up as a barrier for me, is where someone has published a fantastic resource online and I want to reshare it on our main website, and I need to maybe track down who actually owns it so I can figure out who I need to ask for permission. Because I can find it, but sometimes they won't have signed it, or they won't have in any other way made. I could spend an hour trying to determine who the rightful owner of a piece of information I found on the web is before I can even ask if I can reproduce it.
Sure. Before we go on to our next question, I was wondering if any of our guests could explain just a little bit further what geo-blocking is. I think that is probably, for different countries, that term might not be known or understood. So if anyone has a brief explainer of what geo-blocking is and how it works in the EU, that would be great.
I can do that if you like. So geo-blocking is, among other things, the reason that Netflix is better in America. But it's the technology that uses various ways to figure out where I'm physically sat in the world right now. That could be my IP address. It could be known Wi-Fi networks I'm connected to, anything like that. It could be GPS chip if that's built into the computer. And that locational information is used to determine what content I'm given access to. So the traditional examples are things like movies and music and TV shows that are licensed differently for different parts of the world. Like you can go on and watch various, I think like CBS shows or something in the States on their website for free. I can't do that. However, I can totally get as far as seeing the page and being told that I can't do it because I'm in Ireland, so I get to feel appropriately jealous that I can't do it at that moment. And this is all down to generally licensing agreements, syndication to networks in our part of the world, that sort of thing. So money, ultimately. Someone over here has paid for the rights to air that content, or they're sort of betting that at some point someone will, so they don't want to just give it to us for free, which is, I suppose, an understandable position given that they spent some money to make it. But it can be particularly annoying when it's arbitrary, where you'll see it used for something like release dates, where this is totally going to be available in my part of the world, but not for another week. But it's in America now. It's less common now than it used to be, but you'll still see it with some TV shows, that sort of thing. Even on more traditional sort of media. I think they're waiting for, maybe they have a syndication partner here who's only a week behind or something. Maybe that's why the delay comes in. And I think this probably happens in other forms of media as well. I'm mostly familiar with it, as I said, through things like film and music and that sort of thing. But I imagine there's some equivalent in more academic content.
Totally. I actually, Christy, you might know this. We're both Canadians living in the States, but I know this happens so often in Canada too. There's so many times when you're so excited to watch this video everyone's sharing and you click on it and then it's like, it's not available in your country. And you're like, oh, like that's so upsetting. Like, what am I going to do now? Like, where do I go? Like, how can I see this wonderful content that everyone's so excited about? And then you're like, oh, kind of you have that moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of geo-blocking. Well, when I first moved over in 2012, CBC, the Canadian primary public broadcasting network was because friends and family members would share things on Facebook, and I'd try to get to it, and I would, not be able to. And I just think, if I was a 2-hour drive on the other side of the border, I could just see this content. And it probably was, nothing major or anything, but it was really frustrating to not have access to that information. But with academic systems, the access you have depends on the subscriptions your library has. And so bigger universities have better libraries. They are able to spend more on subscriptions as a general rule. Some of them don't, sort of as a matter of making a point, don't subscribe to certain journals. I found that there was a pretty dramatic difference in what I was able to access digitally when I came from the University of Guelph in Canada to Michigan State University, because Michigan State University is huge and very, very, it has a very rich library, essentially. And Guelph has a fairly good library, but they would do some cost-cutting measures, for example, where they wouldn't have digital content of things that they had in paper form in the library. And so there was essentially this window of things that were archived, so it was made sense for them to have as digital content, and things that were recent, so it made sense for them to have as digital content. But the things that were physically in the library, you had to go physically to the library, look up, and get. So it was essentially this window of 1990 to 2002 that you always had to trudge over to the library to go get. And so the way academic material is licensed really depends a lot on the financial situation of the institution you're affiliated with. And if you're not affiliated with an institution, you're not going to get much access at all.
Yeah, that kind of access is a giant issue in its own right and completely related to this. Amira, do you want to bring the next question? We're doing great with discussion. This is fascinating. We'll be a little bit mindful of time. I think we can balance out prototyping and discussion time, but I'd love to hear more about some of the questions we have lined up.
Yeah, I mean, I think many people actually kind of already jumped and preluded to the next question. But I'm going to ask in case there's anything else that wants to bring to the top. But I'm curious, and this is really important to the conversation on copyright. Like, what obstacles does copyright present in your work as an educator? So we've heard a little bit about not being able to show, the frustration of students not being able to show their final productions out in the world. We've heard a little bit about, trying to track down and reproduce other people's works and getting permissions. Is there any other obstacles that we can think of?
Come to mind of accessing resources. I'd just illustrate with an example. We had an integrated unit where we wanted to bring in the language arts to work in with drama and music. And what immediately sprang to mind was Doctor Who, Doctor Who, and accessing some of that, and those amazing characters that are developed within Doctor Who, especially in the recent years. And then we had this great session where we're building ideas and building a curriculum together, but then we couldn't access any of the movies because of this geo block that exists. And then your ideas sort of, unless you really pursue that and maybe get a proxy server from somewhere, which you have to bring in other people, that idea dies, and that's pretty sad. And that's just a few teachers getting together and discussing ideas. And I think the students have that same thing where they've got a real cool idea, and you build up, you go through that process, then all of a sudden it stops because you can't really get to what you want to get to. That's super frustrating, and it's I suppose dealing with that frustration. Yeah, we could look for another thing, but we really want to use Doctor Who, So it's dealing with that frustration, and how do you bring that aspect into curriculum and have the opportunity to talk about that with your students. Because quite often you'll never get that chance because that idea will have gone, but maybe you can bring that frustration into another aspect of their curriculum to discuss as a thing for the students and how we can go about it. Probably if we asked the students, they could probably find the material we wanted. So maybe bringing the kids into that as well might be a good thing. I don't know. Just that was another thing that there is. Get access into resources because you'll have read about all, a lot of these big corporations that are providing educational content that's heavily curated, possibly out of date as soon as it's been produced, and you're buying into those resources when actually some of the best resources are out there on the open web, but sometimes with the geo-block difficult to access. And I'd prefer to have the students have the freedom to find these resources. They're not going to buy into these big educational providers. They should be able to access that anytime, anywhere. So it's that, the bridge between those two things.
I suppose one other thing that comes up every now and then is when I'm trying to teach a young child how to build their first web page or whatever, and they want to put images and videos and stuff off the internet on their website. I have to explain to them that if we actually go ahead and publish their website, they're going to be breaking a few laws. They're like, hey. They just want to put the stuff they love on their website, and I have to explain to them that just because you love it doesn't mean you own it. But actually going to teach you how to make Google find you the things you want to use are actually owned by a multi-billion-dollar corporation somewhere.
I'm so glad you captured that line, Chad. Philip, I love that. Just because you love it doesn't mean you own it, which is it's so clear, like it's true. We love these things. We put the music in that we love, we put the video, we put the images, and even like the lines from textbooks and copy that we love, but that doesn't mean we own it. So what does that mean for us as educators, and then for people that are sharing it with others who want to create and are excited to create, but then are often blocked on the actual sharing of what they've just created?
I think that kind of segues nicely into maybe what we can use for our last question before we do some prototyping. So, and this is something people have kind of addressed in other answers as well, but now is a chance to offer up any other advice or experiences you've had. So when you run into situations where you might be mentoring a young scholar or an 8-year-old creating a website, or someone thinking about, where do I do this work so that I can make sure I can bring it with me when I'm done with it? What advice or workarounds or resources do you use to help your learners understand what's at stake or what's at play? How do you help them understand those rules and what they can do within them to maintain ownership or to share out what they've built, even if it's within someone else's framework? And this could be, this doesn't necessarily need to be like just do it advice, but if you use a tool like Scratch that has or Coder Dojo or another platform that has open licensing kind of built into its DNA, what are examples of that? I guess I'm asking that you use with your learners.
Well, I have a thoroughly unsatisfying answer for that. Because academic science is so patchwork and we're doing a whole bunch of different applications, I have to direct my students to look at what grant is funding them, look at what the intellectual property rules are within the university, look at where you're trying to publish, and then try and figure out how to use those regulations that gives you the best situation. And so it's really unsatisfying because I can't give a soundbite type answer to them because well, it's not an easy answer because of all of the different regulations potentially in play. I did do some poking around on the web, and it looks like as part of coursework, most students retain intellectual property rights of the things that they produced, but universities tend to retain a sort of a fair use kind of rider on it, and that they can continue to use that material to compare it against other students' material or in future coursework. So that seems to be a regulation that happens at a lot of universities.
One way I'd just use Chad what said about Scratch. You know, when we're working with an open platform and with a big community around it, we actually do highlight the fact that this was created as an open resource for the world, and actually have a discussion as to why that would be. You know, why aren't Scratch charging, you know, $10 a month, and actually open that discussion. So it's actually prompting more questions from the students as to why, rather than just launching ahead with it. Our unit we're doing now with the grade 7s and introducing Scratch and introducing Mitch Resnick and all those ideas around it is very much part of that community. And actually we're having to really struggle with the students, because we're saying, hey, everything you need to know is out there because the fact that it's open and people are so willing to share all their creations and allow you to remix those creations. So we can actually completely change our role and be that facilitator, the coach that just guides the students where to look. And it's because of this thing, and we keep actually reinforcing that it is that, and like the likes of processing. And I think the difficult one is always the modeling of this, isn't it? Because when we're hastily putting together a set of slides, we'll quickly rip images and stuff to put together without giving undue regard to some of the copyright attached to the images. And actually us as educators modeling some of those processes, but having that discussion. And I think we're actually missing the shameless plug of the web literacy resources that are actually out there now, because I'm just at the stage where I'm working with our grade 5 students, and we're talking about passwords and passcodes, and actually just working with those resources and looking at the failings of the worst 10 passwords in the world, for over the last few years, and having those discussions have been super productive. And it went from what was going to be a 30-minute lesson into two lots of 2 hours, because the discussions were so good around that, and they were so enjoying actually checking passwords and creating new passwords and just involved in those discussions together. So great resources, get in there and use them.
I totally cheated too. I posted in the Etherpad online what is 82 right now, but might move. Chad actually created some curriculum on this that I found was so valuable, because I love getting people to make memes and remix ideas and posters and media and all this stuff. And then I realized that I was never teaching that other side of it, on what actually happens with that content or whose content that is. So I definitely appreciate it when Chad build something up that I could use to share that.
Yeah, it would be great also to think about if partners in Europe and other parts of the world ever want to localize some of that stuff. So it's about fair dealing instead of fair use, or open norms instead of open licensing. Would totally be up for that. Phil, wanted to give you a chance to share any other kind of resources you use to help your learners and the mentors who work with them find places to work in the open that preserve kind of their ownership and ability to share before we go
on. Honestly, because we want to publish everything as Creative Commons, and by a website they are doing that automatically, we don't have to do a whole lot of teaching. The only place I really come across it is where I'm explaining it to people in Dojo, where they're actually coding that other people's code, for example, entirely, unless it's an open source project you're taking it from, is probably not okay. And even if you are taking it from open source, you have to go read the license. There's probably going to be some rules associated with taking code from here, even though it's not copyrighted by taking the code. You're agreeing to something. Maybe it's contributing to the project. Maybe it's open sourcing your own project, depending on the license. That and the general lesson about why you can't just cover in everything craft. That's the problem I was talking about earlier. And they generally do get that one. I think the open source one is one I've not had to explain because as a general rule, the kids are just making web pages, sort of fairly simple tools, at least in the rooms I must ask around, though the people who teach the more dojos, what they've come across.
Thank you. I like that, and I think others have reached it tangentially, at least too, right? The idea of start in an open place for content creation. I think that seems kind of crucial to avoid obstacles and blockers later on, but may not always be possible. So with these issues in mind and all the different things we could unpack about them, let's think a little bit now about prototyping something together at line 89. And audience members on the Etherpad and who are watching the video, please follow that link to watch live as well. This is a place for you to join in too. Let's think about this together for a moment. What would be good to put together, to prototype together, that would help maybe pass along some of the lessons that we've learned, or surface some of the questions that we think everybody should answer when they're trying to figure out how to help learners own what they create? We could frame it like that. But let's take a few minutes at line 90 now and just type in our suggestions. What would be a good prototype for us to make of something that would help our learners understand copyright, open licensing, how those things apply to their work, especially if it's something that they're proud of owning and want to take with them. Then as we work, I might sneak in a question or two, or Amira might sneak in a question or two from the audience as well. But let's start typing together at line 90 and see what happens between now and, let's say, another 3 or 4 minutes. There are some awesome ideas coming in already. This is great. Please do join us and add yours. And as we're doing that, I'll throw a question out for people to answer either on the Etherpad, or guests, please do chime in as well. So there was a question about what happens where you are if, say, you're in Mark's club and you decide to, or Mark's school, and you want to take a project with you. Just like practically, what happens? Like, is it culturally accepted and just kind of happens, and the school looks away from that? How are such things enforced where you are? I guess it's kind of a question of if you've created something, but it's within a framework somebody else owns, what are the consequences for trying to maintain your own ownership of it?
I think that's a big question, because actually, although the organization claims to own the work, actually there's nobody policing it, and there's no one actually, nobody actually going to, I don't know, but there's been no instance of anyone coming and saying, hey, you're using this and you shouldn't be doing, because we own it now. I think the problems may occur as they're 20 years into the future, and all of a sudden they're seeing one of the movies they created on a website that the organization's using, but they've not given the credit to the student as being the creator of it. That's something I envisaged may possibly happening. I mean, for things like using Scratch, I actually encourage the students to use their own personal emails when they're setting them up, so they're by default the owners of that work. I mean, the Scratch thing's open anyway, but in some areas that we're using, I encourage them to use their own accounts, because when they leave school, they're going to take that account with them. So in effect, they're keeping in a way the ownership of it. It's a very grey area, and probably needs further looking in by the organisations that say we own everything that's created in school, because every teacher will know. I mean, particularly international teachers, school teachers who do move from country to country, that you're creating curriculum resources. But you are, I mean, the community is that you're actually sharing a lot of resources globally as well with your peers around the world, and no one's saying you can't. You're saying that, you know, legally you can't do that, but actually everyone is doing it. So why not change it? It's just like it causes a lot of unnecessary conversation and form filling.
And there was something you said that reminded me as well. And again, I would say this is probably context specific, so you'd want to check this where you are and where you do your work. But open licensing too is a part of copyright. It's assigning an open exemption to something you still maintain ownership of. So you're still the creator of that work. It's that you have an opportunity to kind of explicitly set up the terms under which you'll share it. So learners concerned about ownership don't have to worry about giving up copyright, I think. When they openly license something, if they want to share it in those ways, they're still going to be the owner of it. It's that they have made a decision to kind of work open, right?
Yeah, I think that is how it works, and I'm not sure, but I think even if I did if I wrote an app and I did an open license non-commercial release of it, I think I'd still own the copyright, so I could do a personal commercial release of it if I wanted to.
Something for us to discuss out in our guide here.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we've taken a few minutes and there are still ideas coming in, but maybe we can identify something to kind of jam on together between now and say 5 minutes of the next hour. I'm taking a look now at line 94 and looking through these great suggestions, like what if you had an X-ray goggles style approach that would let you see into the licensure DNA of something on the web? That's pretty fascinating. Something that would alert you to terms of service where you are publishing something, so you would know as you click that publish button or something, when you get a little pop-up or an alert that says, did you know that by submitting this here, you are agreeing to this kind of terms of service or ownership? That's really interesting too. These are both great kind of software tools. A reading tool where people could test their ability to recognize things that are openly licensed by how they're framed. Blogging tutorial, a guide for sharing projects or on Creative Commons, ways to kind of create and use your own addresses or accounts or open platforms. And then we have just a few more coming in here. Audience members, I'd encourage you to go in and +1 anything that seems especially interesting to you that we could at least kind of get a little start on here together, and that would show us where some interest and heat are. But guests, this is time for you to chime in as well. Looking at line 94 and down, is there anything there that really kind of grabs your attention, like, oh, I want to spend the next 10 minutes kind of thinking about that?
I gotta say, I like the X-ray goggles because that solves my problem specifically of, hey, who made this? And how do I find them? The notion of a tool tests my whether something's fair use is pretty, because I've always kind of been a bit doing anything with copyrighted material because I don't know where that line is. So I would and have some confidence that I have now learned where that is. And of course, yeah, for the but more from the something where I can give it to them and say, hey, great, so your video game, whatever, or you're thinking you want to design this with an eye to event, just read this first to make sure that, you know, what you're creating is sufficient for us, I guess, or in terms of the guide on line 99 to share it. So I've got 3. I'm not sure. Was I supposed to pick 1?
No, 3 is fine. Let's see where the overlaps are. Guests, do you want to, have you already +1? Do you want to chime in on any others? I see a couple with a couple +1s. I see one with 3 +1s. Now's the time to kind of cast those tie-breaking votes, so to speak. Great, now they're all 3 +1s.
There's just so many.
I know.
I want to do them all.
So let's come to a decision. Guess, what do you think? Let's build a little consensus here. Do we want to make a, before you start guide, here's how you can try to maintain ownership? We have a lot of +1s now, probably the most, again, on a guide for a project. But the X-ray goggles idea has some links too. That would be almost very interesting to like see if we could start a petition for the World Wide Web Consortium to include like a licensing tag. That would be fascinating. Although people probably do that with meta schemes already, and I'm just ignorant, but that would be kind of neat. We have probably about maybe 8 or 9 minutes for this. How about we do, for the sake of expediency, and to maybe invite the most people as possible to contribute, we'll do that, start on like that guide, like things to consider and steps to follow from the start for open projects for young people, for learners. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to put that at line 110, and then we can all join in underneath, putting down, pulling out, curating what we think is most important from today's conversation and our experiences. So again, I can encourage everyone to contribute. Audience members, please do join in. And once we get kind of rolling there, we might sneak in one last question. That looks like enough. Let's dive in. That's great. These questions are super, especially having people think about audience. I think is fantastic and purpose.
Yeah, as people are typing, I'm just I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I'm starting to think like, how do you share this type of information with learners? Is this something you print out and you put in a classroom? Is this something you add to the beginning of curriculum or material? Is this something that an educator shares formally or informally, or like I'm saying educator, but it could be facilitator, it could be mentor. What's the best way to actually, you know, disseminate and actually convey this type of information to a group of learners? I'm saying this out loud, but anyone in the Etherpad is welcome to answer, or anyone in the call is also welcome to say how they imagine this fitting into their work.
I think it's a great question. That's something we often think about. You know, is this something that you would roll out as part of face-to-face convening, a small one like clubs or a class? Is this something you would do a weekend workshop on? If this was online, you know, how would it look? Would you have lots of examples of different things in different contexts and kind of work in some of those practice tests? You know, can you tell which one is fair use or fair dealing? Or whatever the local equivalent is in other parts of the world. Guess what do you think? What do you think might be effective ways to deliver this content? Is this something that's better, you know, like face to face, where you can have kind of a more maybe private, less documented conversation for real questions about copyright? Is this something that could be delivered effectively online? How would you like it to be?
Everyone's so deep in thought and in the Etherpad, which is great because there's a lot of
I know,
ideas
right?
coming through.
Oh, this idea, it's too good.
I know. So Chad, maybe you can kick us off. As someone who was like a teacher, how would you share it in a classroom?
Yeah, I think part of the inspiration for the activity you mentioned earlier, the fair use free-for-all, came from seeing students use so many different kinds of visual artifacts in the things that we would build. So many images, so many videos. And in some cases, kind of without knowing it, they were participating in different like fan art communities where maybe more open licensing was the default, but they weren't necessarily aware of that. And so I do think having some practice, whether it's online or something that you do gathered around a table with physical printouts, right, photos or something like that, or projected, I think there's something to gathering people all together in the same place to kind of work through that as a group and have fun with it and see people's reactions and have a really frank, open, but fun discussion. You know, you can pick examples that really speak to, that's the advantage of doing it like local, small, face-to-face. You can really tailor the artifacts you're going to use to the interests and affinities of your group, and that helps drive home, I think, the technical aspects of this. But an online piece, I'm not sure how you would, maybe you'd offer several online pieces or something that was really meant to be remixed and localized. I'm not sure. Let's take just another maybe 2 minutes or so here. And for anyone who wants to join in the conversation on the Etherpad or here on the call about ways you'd like to see something like this delivered, that'd be great information to have. But we are going to have to go on in just a few minutes to kind of summarize and wrap up.
We do have a comment in Etherpad from Greta who says she would also either deliver it in small groups or deliver online via video or animated, which is actually really fun. And I think that that makes this very engaging for learners or people to see it or be able to hear it, similar to the small group example you were saying, Chad.
Yeah, and I think in the resources linked to earlier in the pad for the Maker Party campaign, changecopyright.org, there's a video there. I think if you follow along and kind of keep checking back for when Maker Party activities go live this year, I think there'll be some video content in there as well.
And I'm going to squeeze in one more question before Chad rolls this up. But
do it.
Randy's got a comment in the Etherpad of when is the right time to share at what point in a project? Do any of our speakers want to chime in?
I think near the beginning.
Yeah.
And also, I got to say, I'm a fan of the video-based alternative. Everything really, we self-directed learning. All our content is go off, do it yourself. So everyone kind of move at their own. So every kid's watching individually, or I assume somewhere else and is watching individually. But yeah, the sooner you do it, because some of these decisions might change how you design your whole project. I mean, if I decide I'm going to go fully open in a software project and I pick a particular license that changes can't use in terms of the projects and that when building it, might make my life a whole lot easier. Ooh. If there is, I don't know where to find it. Just on the curated wiki comment. Sooner is better.
I can add to that. Yeah, I think that sharing sooner is better too, and thinking about licensing sooner is better as well. When I'm working with my students, I encourage them to essentially publish their intermediate products, like the data they're producing, the code they're producing, and thinking about licensing that as they're doing it. So we're publishing everything on GitHub and on Figshare and that sort of thing as we're doing it. And so thinking about sort of downstream uses of those pieces as well, I think is a really important thing. And also it helps keeps the project going. If you can't finish it, it allows
sustainability and a long tail. Perfect.
Yeah. It allows people to pick it up.
You'll forgive me. I'm going to step in and do my best to be a polite, rude host, but it is about that time where we say thank you, guests. This has been great. Thank you, audience members. Tons of participation today. A real rainbow of an Etherpad. Wonderful to see. So thank you all. I do want to say at the bottom of the pad right now, near line 153, there are some other opportunities for community engagement, including having your learners participate here in the United States in the Letter to the Next President campaign from the National Writing Project. We also have a number of October events coming up celebrating Ada Lovelace Day, and it would be great to have you join us and kind of share your stories and inspirations about women's challenges, innovations, and leadership in STEM-related fields there as well. So thank you all again. I'm going to pass things back to Amira to bring us home with closing thoughts or questions.
Yes, I just want to see a deep thank you as well for all the speakers on this call and the lots of engagement we've gotten on the Etherpad and creating our easy resource already, which is fantastic. Just as a personal, like when I first started teaching and educating youth, I would literally just take pictures off the internet and use them. And I think understanding more copyright for me and how it plays out with education and really what people can use and actually share after is huge. And I think the more I know about it, the more I understand it, the more I can teach it and share it to others. So this all helps that and really has changed my framework and way of thinking as opposed to what I would have done like 5 years ago in a classroom. And so I'm just going to roll through and do final thoughts from all the speakers. We have about like just a 30-second share out from each person, maybe a final reflection, question you want to throw out into the ether world, or however you want to lead it. But I'm going to start backwards to the way I started. So Christy's laughing. I'm going to go, I think it's Philip. Philip, do you want to go first? Quick reflection.
I was thinking, great. I'll have a chance to listen to everyone else and find out what I should say. No, I enjoyed this. Discovered I did actually, as he said, and yeah, I got some good insights from the Etherpad here. I'm gonna have to read through it all and think about this because I may end up going off and producing a little bit of a sort of a one-page little guide for the kids on this sort of thing at some point.
Yes, let's work on this together.
Yeah, sure. And of course, I suppose I should plug things. If anyone would like to learn more about Coder Dojo or start a dojo in their community, check us out. It's great, it's free, and you know, your children learn to make video games or something.
Sorry. Mark, take 30 seconds. All yours.
Yeah, we'll do. I really like the idea of the publishing as you're making things, and that can be something you make a physical object, or but finding ways of publishing what you do. That's something I want to just think about with a couple of colleagues at school, and how we can share that with the staff. You know, we're not involved in every class, but how they can get the kids to, and it's more or less not rushing through things, actually taking the time to, once you've had your final movie project, for example, that you're actually really aware of what you're going to do with it, what school's going to do with it, and some way of finding how you can actually put a license on that that's your own. That's sort of where I'd like to go with it. Thank you so much. Enjoyed that.
Thank you. Christy, take us home.
Well, okay, thank you so much for having me. I think that we have a real opportunity to empower our trainees when we teach them about copyright. It gets people thinking about, you know, the future, where their work sits within the context of the world. So I think that there's a real opportunity to make people excited about copyright, if that, yay. I know it sounds like it's something that, you know, you couldn't necessarily get students excited about, but it touches on legacy. It touches on giving them a place in the community. So I think that we can really play up those aspects and get people into it. And also check out my course.
Drop the links for courses and stuff in the Etherpad. Chad threw up some twinkle fingers, which meant he agrees that we can make copyright fun and exciting and interesting. A quick thank you again for everyone on the Etherpad who has joined us in this call and has contributed. It looks like we're definitely going to be collaborating on some resources to come out of here. And thank you for our team behind the scenes that is helping put this together. Thank you, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.